Railway history. Unfortunately, much of our railway history is gone and forgotten, but parts of it exist around us in museums and displays. Sometimes it is in plain sight if you know where to look, or off the beaten track. In this series, I will discuss various railway historical events in an effort to help keep our railway history alive. In this segment of a look back, I'm going to once again look at some of the pictures that are in the beginning of the introduction and at the end. Two of these pictures were taken by my father in the late 40s in MERRITON. One is of CN engine 2492, a 280 consolidated engine, and the other is CN motor 20, or really an NS&T engine. I'll get into that later, why there's a bit of a distinction there. It's a steeple cab electric. So let's get to it. CN2492 was built in 1918 by Montreal Locomotive Works, and it was sold to the Canadian Northern Railway. Well, the Canadian Northern Railway was a privately owned railway, which was one of the early transcontinental railways across Canada, after Canadian Pacific, of course, in competition with Grand Trunk, went bankrupt in 1918, which, funny enough, is the same year this locomotive was purchased. In 1918, when they went bankrupt, they were purchased by the Canadian government, which held on to it and ran it until the Canadian government itself created a crown corporation called Canadian National in 1923, which then took over. The configuration of CN2492 is 2 leading wheels and 8 driving wheels, otherwise known as a consolidation. The driving wheels tend to be of a lower height, which is ideal for hauling freight trains. CN2492, unfortunately, was scrapped in 1958. Next up, we'll look at CN motor 20, or as I mentioned, NS&T. Well, the NS&T was the Niagara, St. Catharines, and Toronto Railway. And here's a great book I highly recommend to read if you're interested, by John Mills. It's a really good rundown of the Niagara, St. Catharines, Toronto history, and also some great pictures in there as well. The Niagara, St. Catharines, and Toronto Railway, or the NS&T, was formed in 1899 from what was previously called the St. Catharines and Niagara Central Railway. And it lasted until 1908, when it was purchased by the Canadian Northern, who still ran it as an NS&T. And as you know how the story goes with the Canadian Northern, they went bankrupt. It was turned over to the Canadian government, and in 1923, Canadian National was created. Well, Canadian National created a subsidiary called the Canadian National Electric Railway, which is a conglomeration of the NS&T and some other electric railways in Ontario and such. And that was also created in 1923. So the NS&T continued to run basically as its own entity. The NS&T identity still hung around even after CN took over operations. However, through the years, as time went on, the NS&T logos faded, as you can see in this photo taken by my father in the late 40s. And eventually, CN started putting their own emblems on the engines and their own variation of their colors. And then finally, in 1960, the NS&T Electric Railway ceased operations, and CN fully took over, running the industries in the area but using diesel locomotives. In addition, I should mention that the NS&T wasn't just freight operations. They also had an extensive network of streetcars and interurban cars, which carried passengers all over the Niagara region, from St. Catharines to Thorold, Niagara Falls, Welland, Port Colborne, and such. And it was quite a network. In this picture, you can see motor number 130 at the Thorold station. So by chance that I found these old pictures that my father had taken in a shoebox and looked into them more, maybe a piece of history would be lost. Instead, I was able to find out some information about these engines and share them with you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching an episode on railway history. If you have any aspects of railway history that you're curious about, feel free to reach out to me with your suggestions or questions. Also, if you like this video and are interested in seeing more historical content, please subscribe to my channel.